Every great once in a while, a technology comes along in IT that is just so incredible. You can't believe you're actually seeing it. And virtualization was certainly one of those. I can still remember where I was the first time I saw it, who was standing there with me, just everything about it. Really cool stuff. Let's start with a question here. What exactly is virtualization? It is the ability to run multiple operating systems on a single machine. Now, we're not talking about a dual boot or anything like that. We're talking about one computer and in this instance, running an operating system. And we can install additional operating systems that boot up and run in their own separate processes. And we can see them in individual windows. So notice we've got a machine here that might be running, say, Windows Server 2008, but we've installed as a virtual machine a Windows Server box, Windows Server 2012. We can open a window and run it. Then we've also installed Linux. And so we've got a flavor of Linux. We've installed it. We can open that window up and run that virtual machine. Then I've got Windows 8.1 as another virtual machine. So notice I can run all of these simultaneously and even network between them. This is what's known as virtualization. Now, there are two types of virtualization you could see mentioned on the exam, but you will run into these and hear these terms out there in the real world. And they are type 1 or bare metal virtualization and type 2 or hosted virtualization. Now, the main thing, the trick to remembering these, the distinction between them is whether or not there needs to be an underlying operating system present for the virtualization to take place. Now, let's go just a little deeper. Type 1, bare metal virtualization. You do not have to have an underlying operating system. Each VM or virtual machine runs directly on the hardware. Now, an example of this would be VMware's ESXi, and that is a bare metal virtualizer. A type 2 virtualization environment would be a hosted environment. This is where you do have to have an underlying operating system or OS, but then once you have that, you can load the virtualization software and then start to create virtual machines and install operating systems into those. A good example of a type 2 would be VMware, Workstation on the PC side, Fusion on the Mac side, Sun's VirtualBox, all those type things would be type 2 hosted. Now, the OS must boot up before any virtual machines can be started in this kind of arrangement, and each virtual machine, watch the terminology here, in a type 2, each virtual machine runs as a guest machine inside the host, which is the operating system. Now, virtual machines provide seriously significant economies. They enable incredibly efficient usage of CPUs, RAM, disks, all sorts of things, because we can put as many virtual machines on a particular machine as we need, and then we can continue to put the right mix and match of virtual machines to get all the advantage of CPUs or RAM or whatever, as opposed, I mentioned this earlier, to having like DNS or DHCP running on a metal box, and it never causes the CPU to go above 25%, and it's not even using the minimal amount of RAM we've got on that machine. And a lot of times you have to have a minimum required amount of RAM to run an operating system, but you really don't need that much RAM to run what you're trying to do with your particular service. And so now you can mix and match these and make efficient use of sharing these resources. Another thing, virtual machines are easily backed up. We can shut down a virtual machine and just simply copy the virtual machine files, and in just a matter of minutes, and in some cases seconds, we can have a complete backup of not just the data on a server, but the entire server itself. We can then move those virtual files to another box and boot up that virtual machine. And it's really great for backups, for redundancy, and so forth. We can take that same file, move it to other hardware. We can clone a virtual machine and in just a few minutes have an exact duplicate of that machine running somewhere. This is great for test environments and so forth. So virtual machine brings just a whole new way of thinking about managing servers and computers. But when you start to marry virtualization with the cloud, it's really what's powering the cloud now, because I can go out there and just pay for the ability to have a Windows Server 2012 box. Well, guess what I'm getting? A virtualized Server 2012 box in a data center with plenty of RAM, lots of network speed, as much CPU as I need, and so forth. And all I have to do is turn the little knob of paying a little extra money to increase any aspect of this. I haven't had to buy a piece of hardware. I haven't had to install the hardware. I don't have to provide physical security for the hardware or environmental maintenance or anything like that. So virtualization is a big deal, and that is what's powering the growth of the cloud.